I worked on what was a programme then. It was funded by the Labour government, and it was called Playing for Success, and it was around establishing learning centres within football stadiums that could support the raising of attainment. So it was ideal. I absolutely loved it. But what I learned from it was that obviously that could happen and would work. But I also learned about the sort of power that football could have on other elements of life, and not just children and young people, but adults as well. So the positive impact it could have on a kind of sense of belonging, a positive impact it can have on health and well-being, positive impact it can have on profiling important agendas like diversity, for example. And I think we've seen more and more of this of footballers themselves, male footballers, taking the stage on that and really using football as a force for societal change.
From Coordinate Sports, it's The Drive Phase, a show about sports founders, leaders and experts and the stories behind their business journeys. Our guest this episode is Allison Tripney, head of Leicester City in the community. Following a successful teaching career, Allison initially stepped into the football community by creating educational programs and initiatives that encourage learning using football clubs as the basis for selected young people. During the episode, we discuss Allison's early life and career, as well as the innovative approaches and programs the club is using to engage and impact young people. Enjoy the show. I'm delighted to welcome Allison Tripney to the show today. She is head of community at Leicester City FC, and the team continue to harness the power of football and the club to support all areas of the community. Welcome to the show, Allison.
Hi, James. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no, really excited. Looking forward to getting into things today and talking all things football foundations and all the work you're doing. How we normally start off is just giving the listeners a bit of background on yourself, get to know you a little bit better. So in terms of obviously working in Leicester at the moment, but you were brought up in Southwest, is that right?
Yeah, I was born in Bristol. Listeners from the Southwest will probably still be able to detect an accent that's not been too influenced by my now home city of Birmingham and the city in which I spend a lot of time at work and socialise in Leicester. Yeah, I brought up in Bristol, went to school there, still got family in Bristol, so get back there quite a lot. Was there this weekend, for example, great part of the country, but decided to leave when I was 18, and I thought it would be good to have a kind of student university experience that wasn't in the city that I was born. Plus, Bristol University is really hard to get into, and I don't think they would have had me. But it's a great way, to be independent and to kind of find out a lot more about yourself, I guess. And I think I learned more about me and independence from uni than I probably did.
Definitely rite of passage.
I studied. Yeah.
So just in terms of like family life and stuff, was it a really sporty football family or?
Yeah, my dad is and still is a huge Bristol Rovers fan, as is my brother and as is my uncle. So when we were younger, I have memories of going to watch Bristol Rovers play, ironically in Bath when they were at the Memorial Stadium. And my biggest memory is my dad would never park anywhere near the ground. And me and my brother always used to complain at like the 3-mile trek we'd have to go on to find the stadium. But then when I went to secondary school, I started to take more of a sort of individual kind of interest in football, I guess. Not the playing of, but watching. And one of my English teachers, who was like hugely sort of inspirational in my career really, and really supported me at school and beyond. She used to live near Bristol City's ground, and she used to rent her rooms in her house out to some of the younger players. And obviously in secondary school we thought this was like hugely exciting, and she used to invite us to games like with their tickets, so we'd be sort of in and around the players lounge, and unfortunately from sort of 12 onwards, I became, much to my dad's disgust, a Bristol City fan.
Oh, you crossed. Oh no, you still a Bristol City fan now, or is he got you back?
He's like, I think it's possibly his biggest sort of disappointment really, is that
devastated.
our daughter supported Bristol City when she was growing up, but thankfully he's got a son and a brother-in-law, and now some nieces who support Rovers. So it's okay. He's kind of got over it by the fact that I can invite him to Premier League games and, kind of show him
I guess
the
that makes
side
up
of
for it a
it.
bit,
Yeah. So not really. I think we weren't a sporty family, no, but we were a sort of very active family, and we used to go sort of walking in the Lake District. We grew up with dogs, so we were always out with them. I have a lot of memories of being outside and understanding the sort of positive benefits of physical activity, as well as then the sort of enjoyment of watching and then arguing about football with my family.
So definitely active. So did that continue? Like you said, you moved away to uni. Did that continue then? Like being, I guess, just living that active life, and because you were studying, was it English you went to study at the time? Yeah,
I studied English and psychology. I just chose 2 subjects that I was interested in. I didn't really think beyond this, the sort of next 3 years really. And I massively loved uni life, and I went to Keele, which is a campus university. I was fortunate to get in through clearing with a bit of help from my deputy head at the time, who was a former student there. I didn't really know what university was, if I'm honest. I think I was the first person in my family to go. But I just liked the idea of going somewhere different and meeting new people that were my age there or thereabouts, and live in a different place. So yeah, I chose English and psychology because I enjoyed them. I thought that sounded like a good idea at the time. Yeah. And sort of following that, I went on to become an English teacher and progressed to head of English in a secondary, working in secondary schools. And I really loved it, actually. I loved being around young people. I loved being able to hopefully make a positive difference. I loved to try to be creative and sort of instilling a love for learning in them, and trying to be a bit different and try and make the curriculum as relevant to as many people as possible, even though I think it's quite narrow in this country, and probably narrower now than when I was teaching. And what I really enjoyed was working with young people that maybe others couldn't so easily, like young people that didn't really maybe fit in a sort of mainstream setting.
So it might have been harder to engage or
because I think with school, it's one system, and we're trying to push everyone through one system. But we know that everyone's different, and that system might work for some, but it certainly doesn't work for all. It's only similar to life, where I wouldn't be able to do your job, and we might have some similar interests and some similar passions, but we might have different skills. And I don't think school kind of brings that uniqueness out of you so much. And actually, interestingly, my friends who have got kids now at secondary school are not only studying the books that I taught, but they're studying the books that I studied. I just think, don't get me wrong, I love the classics, but there's a lot of literature that's been written in the last 30 years that we don't seem to be really thinking about.
I mean, interesting what we're recording now. There was the announcement yesterday around education and stuff, which is probably going back to, I guess, the classic English and maths is a focus, isn't it? That's what it seems like they're focusing on. So I don't know if that's going to be delivered in a different way or curriculum changing or not. But
I hope so. I think there's just a big mismatch as well between what's being delivered in schools and what employers need in the workplace.
Definitely.
And I just don't think it's bespoke enough. I think it's one route, and we try and cram everyone through it. So it was kind of the young people that were sort of outside of that pathway, really.
I was going to say, I mean, probably leading up, so your kind of path into picking back up with football again. So early days, if you've been in and around the club, I know it's more spectating and supporting Bristol City, but in and around the club, it feels like the two things coming together. Now, if you've got the education side and of experience in a football club, kind of from the inside. What was it that, I guess, drew you away from classical secondary school teaching into kind of the world of sports foundation and education, that side? Or would you call it alternative education?
Yeah, I mean, when I was, like I said, I love teaching, and I worked in a mainstream school for 5 years. I left as head of English, but what I was conscious of was I'd gone to school myself, then I'd gone to uni, and then I'd gone back into education. And I actually saw a job just by chance. I didn't know these jobs existed, and it was a job for a teacher to work for a local authority in the West Midlands to design interventions that would help underachieving boys. And it was about relating literacy and numeracy to football. And they wanted a teacher who could plan and prepare resources, deliver to young people of various ages, predominantly engaged boys, and could understand the links between the curriculum as it is and how you can make that more kind of accessible using football and popular culture. And I thought it would be a good experience for me to go and do that for a year or two. To kind of
I bet that, did that just stand out to you then? It sounds like it would have, the way you experienced.
Honestly, I never knew that. And this was, I'm going back like nearly 20 years. So football clubs were only really starting to think about, they might have had community provision in terms of football and, former players delivering coaching sessions and things like that. But they were just starting to think about how they might be able to impact and use football to impact on education, as well as like physical activity. And there were about 6 clubs in the country that were 6 to 10 clubs that were sort of piloting this scheme.
Did you say that was with the local authority in partnership with the clubs? I
was employed by a local authority, then I was seconded to West Bromwich Albion.
Right, awesome.
And I worked, but the idea was always to go and do that for a few years and then take my learnings from a slightly different industry back into school and then think about what I was going to do. But like I said, that was only 20 years ago and I haven't been back yet. I mean, never say never, but it's not looking likely.
Getting less likely now, yeah.
Yeah. So I worked on what was a programme then. It was funded by the Labour government and it was called Playing for Success, and it was around establishing learning centres within football stadiums that could support the raising of attainment. So it was ideal. I absolutely loved it. But what I learned from it was that obviously that could happen and would work. But I also learned about the sort of power that football could have on other elements of life, and not just children and young people, but adults as well. So the positive impact it could have on a kind of sense of belonging, a positive impact it can have on health and well-being, positive impact it can have on profiling important agendas like diversity, for example. And I think we've seen more and more of this of footballers themselves, male footballers, taking the stage on that and really using football as a force for societal change. So obviously Marcus Rashford is the obvious standout for his work in food poverty. Jordan Henderson quite quietly went about galvanising club captains to donate to the NHS at the beginning of the pandemic. And female footballers, obviously with their increased media profile, are beginning to do the same and no doubt will continue to do so. So sort of 15, 20 years ago, you could see the beginnings of this sort of impact starting to take place.
I was just going to pick up on the Playing for Success programme specifically. I don't know where it is now, whether it's in the same guise or slightly altered and maybe just a different name, different approach, or been updated. But back then, when you were delivering that program, I'm not sure did you deliver it hands-on, or was it more like you had to take me out? So if you were delivering it, what was the difference you saw with young people coming into that environment? If it's at the stadium, I'm guessing it's like a totally different energy from the young people coming in, as opposed to just going to the classroom for the English lesson or whatever.
Yeah, there are so many differences to being in mainstream. So first of all, the young people were selected because they needed more support in English and maths. But how can I put it? They weren't usually young people that would be selected for anything.
Got it.
So
yeah.
To be selected to be part of a project at your local football club is the first thing that is quite...
So it wasn't necessarily like the kind of, classic alternative education, maybe those children who've been excluded and things like that. It was just people maybe just underperforming in that specific subject, right?
Generally just needed more support in the subject area for a whole host of reasons.
So they must have been over the moon then when they get there.
Challenging behaviour, but I moved into alternative provision later. So the difference was really that they were chosen, that there was a real sort of sense of belonging. I think that's the key thing that football can give you. And I think it's, what we all want and need, really. So there was that sense of belonging. There were high staff to pupil ratios. So I would teach, but I had a team of mentors with me that were, from the local community, had been to some of the schools that the young people had been to. They weren't qualified teachers, they didn't need to be. They were fantastic engagers. And you don't just learn from teachers, you can learn from your Uber driver, you can learn from your neighbour, you learn from everyone. So it was just getting the right people that could engage with young people. And then obviously the fact that they were in a different environment makes it different. It was positive, everyone could achieve something. And there were incentives like the opportunity to go to a football match, like the opportunity to meet a player and, utilise, I say him because it was male players then, you could, utilise and build players into as an education resource, bring the overarching sort of feel of it was it made learning real. So rather than teach maths from a textbook, look at a league table and work out goal difference or, who's got the opportunity still to win the Premier League at this point of the season and mathematically. And let's work through the formula that you need for that. Far more interesting than putting a textbook in front of everyone and, turn to page 3 and we'll see who finishes this page of sums first. It was bringing learning to life and making it real to the point where I don't think the young people thought they were necessarily learning.
Yeah. So what does it look like now then? Does that program still run or is it slightly different guys?
Finished when Labour went out of power, actually.
Right, okay.
It wasn't something that our current government felt they wanted to take forward. However, it's kind of reinvigorated itself in various guises. And I think there are some of us still around in football that were there at the very beginning of Playing for Success. And what it did was it just showed us that real difference that football can have on education. So it doesn't matter about the project, really. It's just about whether you fully believe in that, and then you can turn that sort of ethos into projects and programs that will benefit a range of young people.
So at the time, so you were obviously seconded with West Brom. What did that team look like at the time? I'm assuming most community trusts or teams are all a lot larger than they were back then. So when you first came into that, how did that look?
When I first went there was the then head of community, and I think there were maybe 2 or 3 other staff. Oh. And then I joined as the sort of 4th or 5th, and it was tiny, but we knew what the potential was. And the Albion Foundation, which is now, which is West Brom's official charity, that I then ended up working for until up to about 5 years ago, and that now has a staff team of between 60 and 70, I would estimate.
Amazing.
And a turnover of probably about 3 mil. So, we've seen a huge growth, because I think that understanding about, and really responsibility, I think, that football clubs have to their local communities, I think we understand more and more about the difference that can make now, and we also know more and more about how to measure it. And there is an appetite from not just the Premier League and their own charitable fund, but other funders as well, to work with us around harnessing that brand and using it for good, really.
Definitely. So when Playing for Success finished, was that when you kind of transitioned to a different role at West Brom, or was that when you kind of moved?
Yeah, what happened was before it finished, I'd already thought, okay, Playing for Success is good, but what else can we do? So this was a programme that took place for sort of 2 or 3 hours a day. So I was like, what else can we do in the rest of the day? So we started to work with young people that were in pupil referral units and sort of emulate that type of education for them, but in the daytime. We started to work with children in care, and that sense of belonging and their connection with the club was really important to them. More importantly, were the quality of the staff that could engage with them and support them. And just gradually, we started to build up. There was just me, and then there was an education team, and now there's a full-on education theme there. And I managed over a period of about 12 years as their charitable trust, which is now the Albion Foundation, developed and grew.
Because at one point there's a lot of like post-16 provision, and like was it futsal and things like that were quite a really big program, weren't they?
Yeah, we were running futsal at that point as well. And ultimately, when I left there 5 years ago, I was deputy director of that foundation and had been for about 3 or 4 years. So what started off as, I'll try this for a year because it'll make me a better teacher, has just turned into something totally different.
And what was that like? I don't know if you'd always thought about it, but going into kind of the administration or the management, like leadership of the organisation, was there something you thought about previously from a teaching point of view, maybe going to be a head teacher, etc., or was it just developed that way?
Do you know what? Looking back on it, I don't think I wanted to be a head teacher. And I think that's why I thought about, even at that point, even subconsciously, right, what head of English, what can I look at now? So I think there was probably something in me that was like, I don't know if I agree enough about certainly our mainstream education system in this in this country to be a head teacher, if I'm honest.
Got it. So you kind of saw that path was staying in education. That's where it's gonna lead to.
Yeah, maybe. So I don't really like plan these things out. They just seem to kind of happen.
Yeah. So speaking of that, in terms of when you move in, like I said, you moved away, kind of deputy second in command, I guess, at the Albion Foundation.
Yeah.
What was was it just an opportunity came up with Leicester, or more to it than that?
Again, it was something that I'd not really thought about. I loved my job at West Brom, and I loved being deputy to the head of community there, the director, Rob. He's been a huge support to me, and still is. And I'd like to say we're friends, and we support each other in our current roles. I think I was thinking a bit more long term, and I think I was thinking, how many more jobs might I have? And I felt that I'd done loads of things, a real diverse range of things at West Brom. And again, look, it's just chance. There's 20 clubs in the Premier League. There's 20 heads of community, not that many, and there's not a huge turnover. So when the Leicester job came up, I think the Villa role had come up previously, and I'm sitting here talking to you now, less than 3 miles away from Villa's ground, but it seemed a bit too close to home with West Brom, really. So when I saw the Leicester job, it was just kind of an ideal. You know what I thought? I thought, I've got a job and I love my job. I'll apply for this and let's see what happens. It wasn't like I needed a job, or I had this, or I even had a kind of pathway where I wanted to be head of community. It just seemed to fall into place. And I think I went to that interview in a really relaxed mindset, because I already had a job that I enjoyed. It wasn't like, right, I need to get out, I want to be head of community.
Yeah, it's not all or nothing kind of, yeah.
Yeah, not at all. And I think possibly that contributed to me getting the job, because I think I was more relaxed. It was a professional discussion, and they offered it to me. And it took me a while to make my mind up, because I still say now my heart's at West Brom, my head's at Leicester, because you can't work for a club for that long and not have an affinity to it.
Yeah.
Although now, obviously, just Leicester City and the strength of the brand, and a one brand city, and the ownership, which is well publicised, and the genuine ownership, and how our owners contribute to the regeneration of the city is, it's another level, really.
Yes. I guess when you landed in that new role, did you have I don't know what you call it, maybe like your 100-day plan, or think, right, this is how I'm going to make a difference, or put my stamp on it? And like you said, it's been well documented how much the owners are invested in the local community. Were they hands-on with you, like when you started out, and did you have much contact with them and stuff?
So yeah, I mean, you'll know that against all the odds, by 1,000 to 1, Leicester City won the Premier League in the 15-16 season, and then I joined in the 17-18 season. Although I was still riding off the back of that promotion with funders and such like. We're never going to stop talking about that, and we shouldn't. I would say it's fair to say, and with all due respect to people that worked there prior to that, the community trust was quite small, and it was quite underdeveloped for the size of the club. And the club had real rapid progress. So that's difficult for every department and every area.
Yeah, on the pitch, on the pitch, it was a massive turnaround. Honestly, it was surviving relegation and straight to be Premier League champions. That must have brought loads of partnership opportunities, and people wanted to be involved. And
partnership opportunities, the ability to draw down Premier League funding. Like I said, one brand, one city. The amount of support across the city was unbelievable.
That's something you don't think about, really. So is that the same with the community foundations, in terms of, like you said, Leicester, one brand and one city? Would you be pushing up against other foundations in the West Midlands? Was that more difficult because of the fan base, or because of, do you have like designated territories that you work in, or is it kind of
when I was
when
I was in the West Midlands, you've obviously got West Brom, Villa, Wolves, Birmingham City, Coventry, Walsall are all quite close to each other. So it was just agreeing really who was going to do what where. But more importantly than that, I think I remember going to Leicester for my interview and I went on the train, and I remember it well because it was like 30 degrees that day, and it's kind of like, what do you wear to an interview when it's 30 degrees, because like you can't rock up in flip-flops. And I remember walking from the train station down to King Power, and the amount of people I saw wearing Leicester shirts, whereas in Birmingham you'd see Villa shirts, you see some West Brom shirts, you see a lot of Chelsea, Man U, Liverpool shirts.
That's it, yeah.
So, but it was a real, I don't know. I just feel it's quite a small city and is a Leicester City Football Club city. I just think in the community arena, it just gives you a greater sort of platform almost to work from. And it's not about just working with people who support your club. And it's not about just working with football fans. But I guess the intrigue of the brand and the power of the brand was greater there because of the title winning season. And they're following that Premier League win, the international student applications across the 3 universities in Leicester increased by 60%. And that's the sort of like power it has that you don't even realise. And that's purely students in other countries watching the Premier League and seeing Leicester and then finding a university in that town because they've seen that team play.
The recognition, yeah.
Absolutely. It's madness, really, like the sort of reach it has. So I think you just have a greater and probably more solid platform when you're in a like one brand, one city.
Like so when you landed, you could see that you essentially it's something you can harness, right? You've got a lot more engagement, everyone's pulling the same way. So that initial plan was, did you set out to kind of achieve certain things or take the charity in a certain direction?
Yeah, I did have a plan. I had 19 staff when I started and our turnover was less than $1 million. So my plan was growth with quality, and it was also to obviously find out about staff and whether they enjoyed their job, whether they had the right resources and information and support to do their jobs to the best of their ability. And actually in the interview task was something like, what would you do in your first 3 years? So in my first staff meeting, I showed them the interview task and my response to it, so that they could almost like see where I was coming from and like buy into it really, but also like hold me to account on it as well. And I also, one of the first things I did was make sure that we had a set of values that we'd established and agreed that we would work to. Because for me, it's not really about it's not about the KPIs that you hit or the amount of people you see. It's about how you go about doing your job and how you might support others, how you might work together, how you might embrace difference, that type of thing.
Change is always difficult as well. Did you have any, I guess when you're coming in with your plans, did it ruffle any feathers, or do you have any kind of, you might want to build your own team as well? So did you have to kind of restructure things and get some team together?
I did, yeah. What I did though was for the first month or two, I didn't really do anything. And I think that sounds like I didn't just sit in the office with my feet up. But all I did was I met every member of staff one-to-one. And then I just immersed myself in the city and our activities. And I just wanted to see what was happening, how it was happening, what was good, because there was a lot of good, and what needed to change. And that sort of helped me inform that sort of 3-year plan, really. And I must say, the other thing I did as well is show what I'd presented at interviews. I think that's really important, because you should then do what you said you're going to do. And you can't do anything on your own. So the key was to bring the staff with me, really, and get them to buy into it and contribute to it, and then ultimately lead bits of it, which sounds easy, but it's not quite as simple as that. But one of the other things I did was just gave them a little bit of insight into me. So I showed them this interview presentation that I'd done, but then I showed them like holiday photos from the last holiday I'd been on, talked to them about the sort of things I enjoy doing, what kind of music I like, a little bit about how I got to do what I'm doing now, not dissimilar to our conversation. I showed them photos of my family, because I think as well they need to trust you and to work with you. Need to just know you a little bit as well and what you're about. To
get on with build that rapport. If you're going to kind of go on a journey together, if you're trying to achieve things, you need to build that engagement for sure. And then I guess, like you said, when you first started, you kind of give the stats there. Did you have I'm always intrigued about kind of how like the business model or the funding model, and like I said, I've had a few clubs on before, but at that time, especially capitalising on the success on the pitch, was it, I guess, what was the kind of split in terms of revenue? Was, because I'm guessing there's a lot more commercial opportunity there. You've got loads of increased demand and things like that you could go out to. Was it generally charities? You don't want to be stuck on just on the funding handouts kind of thing. You want to make sure you're building your own.
Yeah, it was. I think when I arrived, it was what was Leicester City Community Trust was almost entirely reliant, if not solely, on Premier League funding. So I was really clear that we needed to diversify that. Right. And that's not about relegation. It's just about maximising funding that you can get to do more and make more of a difference. So if we can draw down £100,000, then who can we work with to make that £200,000 or £300,000? And it's not about biggest is best. It's around the sort of difference that we can make and how many sort of lives we can impact on. So our target was really clear, and it was 33% Premier League funding, 33% other funders, and then 33% unrestricted funding that we would generate ourselves through the sale of programmes or fundraising activity. We're not quite at that. We're on our way towards that though, but bear in mind we were like 99% Premier League. Our development's been financially hampered a little bit by COVID, but I actually think in some ways our development has been enhanced by it, because I think during a pandemic you think you might know people, but you really get to know them during a pandemic because you have to get to know them. So you should know as a leader how many of your staff live on their own, or you should know if any of them have got vulnerabilities in their families. You should know if any of them have got caring responsibilities. You should know that all of them will hate homeschooling, even though they're great in classrooms full of kids. They don't want to teach their own children, I get that. So we're definitely on the right pathway. We've more than doubled our turnover in the last 4.5 years. And like I said, we started with 19 and today we've got 45 contracted staff.
Wow.
So yeah, we've made we're heading in the right direction.
I guess that's it. It's difficult, like you said, in terms of having that one club in the city. I suppose that brings other challenges in terms of which opportunities you take, because if you've got that, not like there's no competition, but essentially you could go in any direction. You could put the brand towards any type of program, really, and it'd probably be a success. So you've got to really choose wisely.
You're so right, because someone said to me, actually, I think it was Rob at West Brom, can't be everything to everyone. So you've got to be really clear. And one of the things that helped with our clarity was just producing a really simple 3-year strategy. It was underpinned by our values and a really accessible document, like it's only like the equivalent of 2 sides of A4 of text. I didn't want something that would just, we'd find in the stock cupboard in 10 years. On the shelf, yeah, popping open the fire doors. So that really helped us. So we just worked to 3 key themes, and that's education, you won't be surprised here, health and wellbeing, and then community development, which is everything that takes place within our sort of community hub sites, really. And that really helped us, because actually if you say yes to everything, you wouldn't be able to deliver it to the highest standards that your community members deserve. So you've got to be really clear about who you are and what you're going to do and how you're going to do it. Because I think one of our challenges in football with clubs, community organisations, is that we are quite multi-dimensional charities. So we're not just education, or we're not just health. We're a combination of 3 themes, really. So in terms of presenting it and getting that message across, that you've got to be really clear about that, and it's actually as important to know what you're not going to do as it is to know what you are going to do.
Yeah, it's clear in terms of looking at some of the programs you've done in the past and you are doing now. Obviously, Leicester's a really diverse city anyway, but like you've got work with Amnesty International and refugee programs, things like that. And I'm intrigued about the Urban Fox program as well. If you can tell us a little bit more about that one?
Yeah, certainly. I said to our staff team, we can deliver projects and programs as well as everyone else, but what we've got to do is really think about what it is that Leicester needs and wants, and maybe do things that might be a bit different because we've made them specific to local need, and they're also not things that you might typically associate with a football club. So Urban Foxes is basically a skateboarding, BMX-ing and parkour project, because we felt that attracts participants that may not be attracted by football, by either the playing of football,
like structured sport.
Yeah, and we're really fortunate in Leicester that there's like a social enterprise called Mama Skate, which is a girls only skate enterprise that's been developed by 2 amazing young women who want to see more females in skateboarding. And then obviously off the back of the Olympics last summer and Sky Brown's success, we felt that it would be a good way to make sure we want our programmes to appeal to everyone. So because of that, we should have something for everyone. So we really wanted to do something that was different. It wasn't football based, but had a really positive impact. And there's been a lot of research around how skateboarding can increase your resilience, your confidence, your self-esteem, very positive for well-being and mental health. And these were all of the things that we saw children and young people struggle with coming, during and as we begin to come out of the pandemic. So we thought it was ideal.
It's like skateboarding's it's literally that, and then fall off 10 times, get up 11 or whatever you want to say. It's sort of just exactly that in real life, yeah.
Exactly. And we've got some great urban coaches that have developed this programme, and, their ability to engage with young people and then teach them like a trick by the end of the session, and then you see the difference it makes to that young person is brilliant.
That achievement, yeah. So how does the program work then? Is that just at certain locations, skate parks, etc., across the city? And
we've got a mobile sort of skate park, really.
Oh, brilliant.
We've got a van with skate ramps in the back of it. We've got skateboards, and we've got 5 or 6 BMXs, and then a number of staff who have got coaching qualifications in those areas. So we do one of two things. We either go to Mama Skate, a partner organisation, or skate parks in the city, and there's a new one being developed at the site we use all the time. So we'd like to think we've had some influence in that and utilise existing skate parks, or we take our mobile skate park out and literally pop it up. We had it based in Leicester City Centre last summer for like the whole summer, just in
awesome.
Really in the city centre, and then kids could just turn up every day free of charge, self-referral, and come and have a go at it. So you've got music culture with it, you've got there's fashion linked to it, we've got a graffiti artist, and the young people could design their own sort of backboards. It's so awesome. The sort of outcomes you can get for it are huge.
I know you but all the trusts work really closely together. So for me, it sounds like something that probably could be replicated in other areas with other trusts.
Yeah,
is that something you're thinking about maybe?
Others are embarking on it as well, without a doubt. I'm not saying it's absolutely unique to us. Probably our best project name though. But we do. You're absolutely right. There's a real collaboration. There's no off the pitch rivalry. And we're definitely talking to others about how we do it and what they could potentially do as well. And some, like I said, are already delivering urban sports.
No, that's brilliant. And I guess I know you've got your three-year strategy. Are you embarking on a new one? It must be a new one, or midway through another one now. So in terms of the next 3 to 5 years, do you have a vision of where you want to take the charity to?
Yeah. So our current strategy cycles was 2019 to 2023. So we're reviewing now. We've added.
It's impacted but massively by COVID, and that's
Yeah, although we've still been able to, it's still sort of stood up in a pandemic, to be honest. But what we did do as a result of COVID was we put a greater emphasis on youth unemployment, because 16 to 24-year-olds have been sort of adversely affected in terms of employability as a result.
Is that what you're seeing? Is that what you're seeing, like trends in the community at the moment, like following the pandemic and everything that went with it? Is that what you're seeing in terms of that's the main area that's been impacted, or is it other areas? I know everyone has been, but youth employment.
Yeah, mental health, unfortunately, and social isolation, I would say, are the key things that we're seeing. There's still a real sort of anxiety around in some of our communities, and certainly some of our older fans. We have a brilliant group called Silver Foxes. They named that themselves.
Another good name, another good brand.
We do love a good name, and we're running out of them though. But you can see that they've started. We taught them how to use IT more effectively during the pandemic and set up WhatsApp groups, did Zoom calls. We brought former players on to meet them. We kept in touch with them as best we could.
Because we didn't mention that, but in terms of Leicester, you had it worse than most. Like you had that first big additional lockdown, wasn't it?
Yeah, we did. So I don't know if you recall, it was June 2020, and we were starting to see some restrictions ease across England, and then the government decided that they do localised lockdowns dependent on data, and Leicester was the first city to go into local lockdown. So, it essentially means that schools were closed for longer, although obviously still open to vulnerable children and young people. People had to work from home for longer if they were in employment. It meant that services were closed for longer, leisure services. It just had There was a point in June and July in 2020 when I felt that all eyes were almost on Leicester, and it was like, oh look, Leicester is still in lockdown, they can't deal with this, and don't go to Leicester. And I just think that's going to have a lasting, a great. The pandemic's affected everyone in some way, shape or form, but I feel that prolonged lockdown will, and undoubtedly is, having an effect on our city.
And I guess one of the questions we always try and ask is around leadership styles or philosophies and things that you've maybe developed over time, leading organisations and obviously with Leicester now. I'm assuming that was you had to lean on those during the pandemic as well, or maybe learn new things. But what would you say your kind of approach to leadership would be, if you were to explain it?
You're right about the pandemic. It's almost like the ultimate leadership test, really, with like curveballs thrown at you every 5 p.m. briefing. I've never read so much guidance in my life either.
With no definitive instructions on it either. Yeah, exactly.
No instructions and no timeline. But actually, in a way, I think not having the timeline would have been better, because I was one of those people that thought it'd be done in 3 weeks. But I think actually for your mentality, that's not a bad mindset.
Yeah, probably not. I think if all of us, if we knew it was going to be 2 years.
Yeah, it's all right. It's going to be over, don't worry. But then in terms of leadership, I think it's not to be overcomplicated, really. Like, in my mind, what I think about, or when I think about what I'm doing and how I'm doing it, is I ask myself the question, have I done the right thing? Have I done it in the right way? And have I done it for the right reasons? And then if I can answer yes to those, then it's probably the right.
Wrong.
Yeah. And it is about, it's it's kind of what my mum told me, really. It's like, treat people how you want to be treated. I just think if you're in a leadership role, you've got to be, you're a human being. You're no different to anyone else in your team. Although just during COVID, you've got to make more decisions, but you've got to bring people with you, and you've got to understand that you can't do everything. And there'll be people in your team that can do things better than you, and that's to be celebrated. So I've got a great management accountant, for example. I've got a great staff team, and I know that every day, like, something will be happening now with a member of staff will be delivering a brilliant session, and it's not a session I could deliver. And I think that's really good, and you have to sort of acknowledge that. So do the right thing in the right way for the right reasons. Just treat people how you want to be treated, and actually being kind and doing what you say you're going to do are really sort of basic, fundamental things that will actually get you a long way. Yeah,
definitely. Football's always the good analogy as well for leadership, and in terms of visually, you can see you'll see the manager's not out there taking penalties and stuff. It's a good way to look at it. Yeah.
I think Gareth Southgate's done a lot to change the style of perceived leadership in football anyway, and I take a lot from the way he communicates and how he puts his arms around some of the sort of younger players, how he integrates them, what he expects from his senior pros, and that
he comes across really transparent as well, doesn't he? Yeah,
transparent. Make mistakes and say you do, because that's okay, and then you'll create a better environment. And I always think as well, like, we spend so much of our time working that we should be in work that we enjoy, and we should enjoy spending time with the people around us at work.
Definitely. What do you do, I guess, outside of work in terms of looking at, we also have this question around habits or routines or things, maybe it's just stress relievers or whatever it might be. Is there anything that you kind of have, like specific things that you always do every day or every week?
I would say my main thing is I'm not like one of these people that gets up at 5 o'clock in the morning and goes to the gym or anything like that. I do try and maintain a healthy lifestyle, but that's definitely something I need to get better at. But for me, the key thing is the people that you surround yourself with when you're not at work. So it's your close friends that you entirely trust and can, if you've had a long week or a difficult week, you can go and meet them, and you don't even have to say what's happened. They know, and you just have a night, a relaxed evening together.
Yeah, there's like a safe space that you can offload if you need to, or trusted people. Yeah.
And again, I think that was massively heightened in the pandemic. Like your closest network of family, friends, I think really came to fruition during that time. And I think just acknowledging how important that is and how influential that can be to you and ultimately your performance at work, even though it's nothing to do with work, I think is key. And I just think work hard, play hard is the key.
Definitely.
You know, like make the most of travel and of new experiences and live music and theatre, and, you know, just have a really interesting
live life.
live life.
Yeah.
I think it makes you a better leader.
Yeah. So if you were going to go back and give any advice to yourself before you started, if you went back to when you started out in your career, maybe in teaching or whatever it be, would you have one piece of advice if you were going to go back and speak to your younger self and give yourself one piece? What would that be?
It's a great question. I think in terms of leadership, what I would have said to my younger self would have been just focus on the people around you, because if you've got the right people around you and you can work with them in the right way and they can work with you, as importantly, then you can do whatever you want to do. So strategy, brand, funding, all important, but ultimately, particularly in community, it's all about the people. So I guess in hindsight, if I'd really concentrated more on people and people development from an earlier age, then I kind of wish I known what I knew now, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. It's like building that team. If you've got the team, you can go far, can't you? So, no, love that one. Definitely a takeaway for us there. Allison, thanks so much for your time. I appreciate you speaking to me today and being so transparent with us. And just want to say, thanks and all good luck for the future.
Thank you. Really good to meet you and talk to you.
Thank you for listening to this week's show. You can subscribe anywhere you get your podcasts. If you'd like to get in touch with us, you can write to us at dryphase.podcast@coordinate.cloud, tweet us at coordinatesport, or follow us on Instagram at coordinate_sports, or on my account at James_ventures. This episode was produced by Nancy Kwamboka, with support from Claire Goodchild and Lola Small, with special thanks to Rochelle. I'm James Moore, and you've been listening to The Drive Phase from Coordinate Sport.